Good evening. My name is Anthony Luscre, K8ZT, and tonight's program is having fun with Morse. My contact information is here, and my slide presentations tend to be reference material as opposed to simple slide presentations, so you're going to want to have this link so you can view the whole thing later on. And then once you have this link, that'll let you click on all the links that are in the presentation. My presentations are full of a bunch of extra resources, so you'll need that link to be able to actually click on them. You can't click on the screen from here. The other thing is the links throughout my presentations, I don't like this underlined appearance, so I try and do them in a different font and usually a different color. So if you see something that's a different color or font, usually it's a link you can click on. And usually most of the images are links also. This is another presentation I just did, and if you click on this link, it'll bring you out to it. It's Field Day in social distancing. I also have a little quick start guide for people that are just getting into amateur radio, and this is something you can share with new hams. This is my website. Actually, let me bring my website up live here. We'll do that because we're actually not, this is the advantage of Zoom versus being there. So this is my website, and I have a whole page under operating on CW and Morse Code, tonight's topic. And there's just a few links for each of the different pages. So Morse code in amateur radio is commonly referred to as continuous wave or CW. And so I will use the terms interchangeably tonight, Morse code and CW and code. And before 1990, this is the slide I called No Fun with Morse Code. And the reason is it was because it was required, a lot of people did not enjoy it very much. Before 2007, code proficiency was required for most HF voice privileges. Something you had to do. And I know a lot of people just passed their code so they could get their license and then get on there with phone. Other people passed their code and really enjoyed it and spent a lot of time on CW. So different people, different ideas of what they'd like to do. But one of the things that a lot of people didn't like is the fact that they had to do it. So what I'd like to do tonight is talk about how we can make Morse code fun again if you've not enjoyed it the first time, or even if you have enjoyed it, how it can be more fun for you as you go along. So the goal is to help you get on the air using Morse code, to learn how it can be fun and effective way to make HF contacts. And for those of you that are technician class licensees, to get you on HF as soon as possible, but even before you pass that general test, especially if you're waiting for a VEC session in person. And there will be no testing or shaming of your code ability in this presentation. We won't run high-speed code and make you figure out what I'm saying that way. So one of the reasons why I call this fun with Morse code is because it's fun because you choose to do it if you want to. It can be more efficient than single sideband, and we'll talk about how much more efficient later on. I run exclusively QRP. I'm up to about 87,000 contacts on HF, and about 98% of them are QRP contacts. They're not all CW, they're phone and CW and FT8 and RIDI and all the different modes. CW is also an extremely popular contesting mode. So if you're contesting and you're only operating on phone, you're missing out on potential points. So even if you only get a few points that way or a few new multipliers, it helps to make a few contacts in CW during the contest. Another fun thing about Morse code is you can get on there very inexpensively. This radio from QRP Labs is called the QCX, and the QCX sells for $49. And you have to assemble it. It's a kit, or if you don't want to assemble the kit, you can buy a pre-built one for $89. They're a monoband radio, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later. And the other thing is, I always tell kids this, when you're on CW, no one knows how old you are. So all of a sudden, you don't have to worry about standing out on the air or being called a YL when you're actually a young man because of your voice. And then the favorite thing of my wife's absolute favorite part about CW, she hates it when there's a phone contest because she can hear me screaming throughout the house. But when it's a CW contest, I have the headphones on and she never hears anything. So she appreciates CW contesting much more than phone contesting. Now, for those of you that are technician classes, or if you know someone who's a tech that's not here tonight, the fact is there's still HF privileges available with the technician license. And I'm not just talking about 10 meters, which is sort of dead right now during the sunspot low. I'm talking about the fact that there's the old novice bands. The technicians inherited that section when they changed the licensing around. So you have CW privileges on these frequencies. So tonight, I'd like to talk a little about learning the code, using the code, some tools that you can use to both learn and do code, and some tips and tricks. So these are all links in the presentation. By the way, there's homework tonight. You have to go through, or tomorrow you can do it. You have to go through and make sure that you follow all the links are in the presentation. So learning the code, it's very easy to get frustrated when you're trying to learn the code. You might look at someone and say, boy, they just get that immediately, and I can't get it. Everyone learns at a different pace, and people learn differently. So there's no magic, open your brain and pour in Morse code ability. There are three main things, though, that I recommend for everyone when they're learning code. First of all, you don't want to learn by counting the dots and dashes. It'll slow you down way too much. You want to learn at greater than 10 words a minute so that you're hearing sounds, not counting the different dots and dashes. And most people suggest that you use the Farnsworth method of learning. And the Farnsworth method is a way that the code characters are sent very quickly, but they're spaced out more, so there's more space between them. So the total amount of characters you're getting in a time frame is slower, but the actual speed of each of the elements is faster. There's 5 different ways pretty much to learn the code. The one I'm going to suggest you don't use is the old way of doing things, and that's using recordings, because it's very easy to memorize recordings. Don't go on eBay and look for vintage code records, LP albums, and things like that. It's not the way to do it. There's so many other ways to learn code now. The most important thing is to have a plan of what you want to do and how much time you're going to spend doing it and when you're going to do it. So the first thing is pick either a software or a radio app to learn the code with. Set goals and set a time per day when you're going to practice. And then set some long-term goals. Think of the additional frequencies and bands that you're going to get to use after you have the code. Think about the new equipment you might buy to use on Morse code, and think about the on-air activities you can participate in. So one of the best ways to learn Morse code is to have a buddy or buddies that want to learn it together with you. And before, the only way to really do this was in person or in a class, but now you can do it through something called CW Academy. And CW Academy is a combination of on-air and online learning of Morse code. And they have classes to sign up and you go through as a group. So it really is encouraging to work through as a group through CW Academy. And the link is here for that. We'll just pop it open here a second. Oops, that page, the link has to be fixed. You need to go right here to this. And this is CW Academy, and it tells you how to sign up and how to start out and the whole thing. And it's even free. These are 3 computer-based programs for learning Morse code. 3 free programs that you can run on your computer. Here's 3 more. And I think one of these, that might be Morse DX, has a fee with it. It's not very much, it's just a few dollars, but one of these has a small fee with it. These are Android apps that you can learn with your Android phone or your tablet. And by the way, if you have a Chromebook that's newer, you can also run Android apps on a Chromebook. There are also iOS apps, but I don't have an iPhone or an iDevice, so I did not bother to put it together. But a lot of these have iPhone or iOS counterparts. Some of these are free, some cost a couple dollars. I think the most expensive one is $5. Take a look at them all, see which one you like, pick out one you want to try out. In addition to computer-based or app-based CW learning programs, there's also some hardware devices out there. The first one is the MFJ 418. Now, some of you may think that this is a code reader. It is not. It looks very similar to their code reader. It almost looks identical, actually, but it's actually the code tutor. K1EL, the same people that make the WinKeyer, make a Morse Code kit and tutor. You build the little kit, and then it has both a memory pads and dit and dot paddles on it, and it's also a tutoring device, and it's only 25 bucks. And there's a YouTube video here you can watch how it works. You can also use it as a keyer on your radio. So that's the K1EL Morse Code Tutor Kit. There's also a couple Android-based devices out there. The KB5CQ Morse Code trainer is over here, and this is the W8TEE Morse Code tutor, which is in his new book. This is Jack Pudman's book that he has just coming out. As far as sending Morse code goes, there's really two basic ways to send Morse code: with a mechanical device or with an electrical device. And the mechanical device is basically a switch, such as the stray key, where you simply close the circuit and that makes the contact and it sends out a character on your radio. The other way is a semi-automatic mechanical keyer called a bug that was been around for many, many years. And some of you might have used bugs. I'm dangerous with one. I can't use one. No one would be able to hear anything, be able to figure out anything I was sending with one. So it's a skill that you have to learn. Electrical keying can be done with a device that is connected to an electronic keyer device, and then you have paddles, either a double paddle or single paddle. And there's a lot more information on that in this excellent article on keys, bugs, paddles, and keyers. It talks all about what they are and describes how each one of them works, the advantages and disadvantages of them. And again, I can't even spend the time that this gentleman does in this article. So here's some example of stray keys or mechanical keys. This one, and this one are all ones that I have. These three in the middle here. I think I have one of these too. This is a really lousy key, but I think I have one of these around. These are example of the semi-automatic, the bug keys. These are example of electronic keyers. Now there's two parts. As I said, there's the actual physical paddles that move, and the paddles are usually handled by either a spring mechanism or a magnetic mechanism that allows them to spring back and forth. So some of these have magnetic resistance and some have spring resistance on them. They all require some sort of electronic device that it's connected to actually do the keying. This particular one has it on board, it's attached to it, but otherwise you need to have a keyer that you hook up your paddles to. Most electronic keyers also have memories in them, so you don't have to keep sending everything. So for example, on this one back here, you press any of these buttons and it sends out whatever you've stored in that memory bank. So you have one button with your call sign in it, one might have your name in it, one might have your QTH in it, so you can do those very easily. And for contesting, it's very handy to be able to use memory keys. Most recent radios have built-in keyers, so you can attach paddles and use them. A lot of them also have memories in them for keying. There's one additional way to send Morse code, and that's using a keyboard. And that is what I do. Right in front of me, I have a keyboard here, and I will turn it on. So I simply hit the F1 key on my keyboard, and it sends the memory that I have in there. It sends my call real quickly. Excuse me. A few radios have the ability to directly attach a keyboard and send CW or RTTY. Not very many, but there are a few, and I'll mention those as we get down the list a little bit longer, a little bit further on here. The other way to send Morse code from a keyboard is by using a contesting logging software. And most contesting logging software have a way that you hit a button and it sends the reply to the radio. And these can be done by either keying your radio through a serial interface, a parallel interface, which most people don't have anymore. That's pretty much discontinued now, or sending a command language to the radio's keyer. So like on the Elecraft radios, you can key them by using a serial interface, or you can send the programming language from your device, from your keyboard to the radio, and it would send it through that program. Another device called a WinKeyer, which I'll talk a little bit later about. So before I go any further, any questions so far? So we're going to interrupt for a little extra geekiness now. If you're not into geekiness, you can ignore this part, but you can go back and look at it later. But basically, this is the way you set up a device to use a serial port on your computer, or what we have nowadays for the most part is this would be connected to a USB port through a serial to USB adapter, and this keys the radio. So in this case, we use an opto-isolator so that we're not accidentally sending any voltage into the radio via the computer, and vice versa. So by using an opto-isolator or by using transistors and diodes, we can isolate the circuit. And what will happen is when we send the signal to the serial port of our computer, it will cause this this connection to be closed here and to key the radio. Here's two more circuits. Again, one with transistors and one with an opto-isolator. You can also see when you're keying CW keying via an interface, you can usually use a USB adapter with a serial keying circuit, but sometimes you get erratic performance. And this is because in DOS, it was very precise the way it was handled, but in multitasking software like Windows, sometimes there's timing issues. So sometimes it's difficult to send CW with a USB interface. So what a lot of people do is they use a K1EL WinKeyer. And it's basically an electronic device that takes the keying out of the hands of the radio and puts it on this device. So your computer sends the message to the WinKeyer, and then the WinKeyer actually keys the radio. And you can get the micro version of the WinKeyer for, I think, $59. So it's not real expensive. Got a couple of people joining us. And so that's one way that you could have a better keying in Windows. And here's an example. This is the fancier WinKeyer, and then this is the little WK mini keyer. There's also a serial kit available, but again, you'd have to use a USB adapter with this. And they actually even have this WinKey available if you want to build your own little projects. They have the key that actually does all the it has the chip that does all the keying inside of each of these devices. Each of these devices is based on this Morse code IC. The fourth option is CW keying via an interface, and this is when you're using something like MoRIDI, which is a little interface. There's tiny FSK RIDI interface, K3NG's CW keyer software, and these are all things that you can look into a little bit more. I'm not going to go into great detail here. And now back to our regularly scheduled programming. Any questions before I get back into the regular presentation? So once you've learned some Morse code and you want to get on the air, you would think, well, I need to find a really slow sending station that I'll be able to copy easily, and that's going to be my easiest place to make a CW contact. And that's actually usually not the case, because when you're making a traditional rag chew type of contact on the air, it's a lot of work. It's a lot harder to actually sit there and rag chew in CW than it is to copy just a half a dozen characters. So I call this the context paradox. Even though the word per minute speeds are much, much higher in contest CW contacts, there's a lot of reasons why it's actually one of the easiest places to make CW contacts. Because to make a CW contest contact, you don't need to sit there and copy 5 minutes of rag chewing with a bunch of characters. All you need to copy is their call sign. And guess what? They'll send it over and over and over again. You can sit there and listen as many times as you need to. It'll also show up on DX spotting sites, so you'll have a good idea what this call even is before you listen to it. So that'll make it much easier to figure out. You also need to be able to understand your own call sign. And fortunately, after you hear it a couple times, your own call sign will be the easiest CW that you copy, other than dit, and a few other little things. You need to know when they want you to send them the exchange. Because you've imposed upon them to make a contact during the contest, you need to reciprocate and give them the exchange so they get points for the contest contact. You don't care about their report because you're not in the contest per se. You just want to make a contact. So again, you need to know when to send and what to send for your exchange. If they send the question mark, and again, you need to be able to recognize that, that means you just need to repeat your exchange. And if they send a RR or an R or a QSL or thank you, that means they've copied you and you're done. Now, as far as sending goes, you can put all these things in your memory keyer and be able to send it very easily. So you don't even need to send their call sign when you're doing it. You just need to send your call sign and the exchange. So CW contests are a great place to make CW contacts. And actually this dit.fm, this gentleman did an interview with me, and you can go out and listen to the whole interview where I talk about making CW contacts during contest. Any questions about copying CW contacts for, I'm sorry, contest contacts for your CW contacts? Andy, you're muted. I think someone was asking a question, they were muted. Okay. So let's say you want to use CW, but you really can't copy very well. And I want to just take a little segue here real quick. I want to go over to Field Day. This is one of my other presentations. This is in the Field Day presentation, but I just want to talk about it today. Let's say you decide to operate Field Day on your own, but you only have a technician class and license. Well, the problem is if 10 meters is dead and no one's calling on 10 meters, you're going to be really lonely because you can't use the other bands to make contacts on phone. But you can still make CW contacts there. So by being able to make CW contacts on these, it allows you to make Field Day contacts even as a technician on the HF bands. And I will talk more about this on our presentation, but I just wanted to mention that these are the spots that are available for you to make contacts during Field Day, especially this 40-meter spot. There's going to be a lot of people there. So if you can make a CW contact or two, it'll be really good. So let's go back and see how you can do it if you're not real good with your Morse yet, or if maybe you haven't even learned it at all. you can use a Morse code reader. So there's 4 different types of Morse code readers out there, and I'm going to tell you ahead of time, they're not as good as a person who can copy Morse code in their head. None of them are as good. There are limitations, but they're better than nothing at all. So the first one is computer software. The second one is hardware decoders. And then there's also decoders built into some radios. And then there's also phone and tablet apps that you can use to do it. All of these have differing results, better, worse, and in different conditions. So we'll talk about these types of code readers, and then we'll talk about how you can make them work better. So as I said before, most Morse code readers are not perfect, and they work best with strong signals in the clear, perfectly sent CW. I'll tell you what, most of the CW you're going to copy in a contest is going to be machine-generated CW, because most contesters don't send with a key, they send with a keyboard. So it's going to be perfectly sent CW that's much easier to copy. It actually works, these decoders actually work better when it's faster CW. Most of these decoders have a really bad time under 10 words a minute. So you're much better with a little bit faster CW. Now, unfortunately, on field day and during contests, there may be a lot of QRM. So that may be a big problem for you if your decoder is not very good in bad band conditions. And if you have a better radio, you have a better chance of copying it. Now, all these also apply if you're copying by ear. These are examples of computer-based software that can do Morse code decoding. Some of them have a fee with them. A couple, I think this has a fee, and Ham Radio Deluxe has a fee. CW Skimmer does, but FLDigi is free, and I think CW Git is free. I think that's the free one, or CW Decoder. One of these two is free. FLDigi also works with PSK31. So if you set your radio up to use FLDigi, you can use it for PSK31, ready N for Morse code. So it'd be a very good thing to use at field day, for example, if you want to make some contacts. There's also hardware devices. Remember that little code tutor I showed you before? Well, this particular one from FJ looks identical, except for this one has a little microphone right here on the side, and you put it near your radio, or you plug in via a cable to your mic input, your speaker output from your radio into this mic input here, and it will copy the Morse code on the screen here. It's about 90 bucks new. You can find them used if we ever have Hamfest again, or online for usually around $50. MFJ also has one where they incorporate the decoder, and it's a little nicer decoder inside of a keyer that you can also hook up a keyboard to or a pair of paddles to, so it works both as a decoder and as a sender, and it also has message memories in it that you can use. There's one very similar to that. It's made by K1EL. It's K44. Those are the same people that make the Win keyer, and this is that little one right here also. On eBay, you can find these ones for under $12. Unfortunately, they are probably the worst of the bunch as far as working. Sometimes they'll work, but they're not as good as anything I've showed you so far. Now, some radio transceivers have their own built-in decoders. Elecraft has a decoder that works very well, and it's available in all the K3, the KX3, and the KX2. And I happen to have all 3 of these radios. This is my main radio in my shack, is a K3. Now what happens is, I had this little video here showing you on the screen. It decodes the Morse code right here in this 7-character spot, and it just keeps scrolling across. And that guy, you can see it didn't decode very well. Look at we'll watch that again. When you see my call sign, you notice that it didn't decode the K correctly. It decoded it as an E. So he's sending my exchange here in a contest, and then he says, thank you. Now you can see when he calls me here, you'll see how my call is slightly wrong here. See, it didn't get the K. On this side over here, I have a little device that I built. This is a little Arduino kit, and it basically attaches to the L-Craft radios and gives you an 80-character display. All it does is simply take this scrolling 7 digits and makes it into an 80-character display. So you can see it's coming in here as 7 characters here, but it's coming onto this 80-character display. And I sell those kits for around $50. They only work with L-Craft radios though, because they're not doing the decoding on this little kit. It's actually just taking the decoded text from the radio and putting it onto this bigger display. The Kenwood 590 SG, not the 590S, just the SG, has the ability to do decoding in it also, and the displays right here. It replaces the digits as the code is coming in. Now, one of the nice things on the Kenwood is there's free software that you can download from the website, and it has 2 modules, a sending module and a receiving module. And again, it doesn't work with any radio except for the 590, and it takes the display and gives you multi lines of display. And then it also gives you a keyer where you can hold your memories, and you can either do that or you can type right here in this little window and key. So it's a nice little interface, and it's free software. Most people don't realize it's there. You just got to go to the Kenwood site and download it. It's called the ARCP590G. And again, I have a link in here that you can get to it if you have a Kenwood 590 to get that software. There's also other features in the software, but these are just 2 of the features. The Yaesu FTDX3000 has the ability to do decoding right on the screen here. It goes in place of the Spectrum. The 1200 does not do it unless you add the optional FT1. So basically the 3000 is a FT 1200 with the added FT1 display tool in it. It decodes not only CW but RTTY, and actually all 3 of these do. Both the L-Craft, the Kenwood, and the Yaesu do RTTY. The L-Craft also does PSK31 decoding. An oldie but goodie, the Ten-Tec Jupiter, no longer available new, but available on the used market. This is one radio where you can simply plug a keyboard into the back of it. You need an old well, not even a PS2, you need an old IBM AT computer keyboard or an adapter to use your other keyboard with. And it just plugs into the back of it. And as you type, it actually sends. And you can see down here, it decodes in this area right here. And it does a pretty good job of it. This is one of the first radios that had this ability. If you get an older model, you have to do the firmware update to be able to do it, but the firmware is available to do an upgrade to the newer software. Now, I talked a little earlier about the QCX. It's 5-watt, single band CW transceiver. You pick which band you want. You can get 80, 60, 40, 30, 20, and 17. I don't know how the 60 works because it's not channel tie, so I don't know if that's really a viable option for the US. But these other bands work very well. I have a 20-meter one that works very well. And here's a picture of it. It has a built-in decoder right in it. So for $49, you get a CW kit that does a CW radio that runs 5 watts, and it also has a built-in decoder. So you can see it actually decoding here in this little video. Now, in all these cases, the best thing, if you're using a decoder, is also to be able to copy the code in your head. And but between a combination of the code you're seeing on the screen and what you're hearing, you can ignore the mistakes that the radio made, that the display is saying, and get the actual message. So this is a contact I made with N4CCB, and it was, let's jump to the end here. Oops, go back. Come on. Unfortunately, with these embedded GIFs, you can't control them. So that was a distance that was made all the way from Tennessee to Massachusetts with 5 watts. As I mentioned earlier, there's also some code readers available for Android phones, there's also some available for iOS phones. I think these are, a couple of them are free and a couple are a couple bucks. So one of the keys to being able to use a code reader is also being able to copy the code in your head. It's sort of, you would think that's sort of not the way you would do it, but the more you can copy in your head, it will make your code reader that much better. Now, as I said earlier in the context paradox, the more, if you can listen to multiple QSOs before sending, you get a chance to get all the station's other information. So even though they might not be decoding every single time they send, by getting multiple decodes, you have a better chance of getting their call sign right. Use your radio's narrow filtering, use DSP and other noise filtering settings, and those all enhance the ability of the decoder to work. Knowing context clues. By knowing what the station's going to send, then this applies to both using code readers and copying code in your head. If you know what the other station's going to be sending, you have a much better chance of picking out the right characters. So know what a typical contest exchange is like, a typical QSO is like, what they might send, and what a contest exchange will be like. You also need to know a new language when you operate CW, because there's special abbreviations, there's Q codes, which we use sometimes on phone, but not that much. There's also cut numbers, which I'll talk about here in a moment. So here's the CW operating abbreviation, jargon, and abbreviations. There's a number of pro signs, and here's a whole list of them, of abbreviations and pro signs. And if you text a lot, you'll like the abbreviations for Morse code because they're standardized, whereas texting is not. So we've done a much better job of standardizing the abbreviations than the texters have so far. Q codes, there's a whole list of them. These are the most common ones. That other link has a giant list of them. And then there's some shortcuts. Most Morse code operators send ES for end when they mean end. You're supposed to send 8 dits for a mistake, but if someone sends a bunch of dits, you don't even have to count how many there are. You just know they made a mistake. So if someone just goes dit, 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 that just means it's a mistake. They send fur instead of 4. They save a little bit of time because it needs just 1 dit as opposed to 3 DAs. And then also cut numbers. And these are common in contesting. They'll send an N for 9. So instead of sending a report of 599 for your RST, they'll send 5NN. A lot of times they'll send a T for 0, especially when it's a leading 0. So they might go TT3, and then that way you know that you didn't miss the digits were in front of the 3, that they're actually sending just 3. And a little rare, but sometimes still sent, is they'll send an A for a 1. And these are in order of likelihood. You're very likely to hear this, somewhat likely to hear this, and probably not going to hear this very often, but you just need to know what it is. The other context clue is knowing what missounding characters sound like. So if people drop or chop dits off the beginning of their sending, sometimes it'll sound different. You can still figure out what they're saying. Also, some people send poor misspaced characters. And then there's my favorite, stations who never pause between any characters. So everything is just one giant long word. So other things you can do to help be more successful using a code reader is, if you're in the assisted category of a contest, excuse me, I had a cough there. If you're in the assisted category of a contest, you can use DX spotting cluster to get an idea of what the potential call signs might be. If you're using N1MM for your logging software, when you go to put it in the exchange, you can pull some of the data from a history file. So sometimes it'll tell you what the state might be of a person based on that. You still need to confirm it though with your ears and your CW reader decoder to make sure it's right, because they might have changed states. They might have been in a different county. They might not be the same as they were if you're using it for a contest. But again, if your whole goal is just to make a contact with them, you don't even care about the exchange because you're not entering into the contest, so you don't care about the points. Any questions about CW decoders so far? Okay, remember I talked about the FL Digi software, and it's something you could use very easily in a contest. So if you want to use it in field day, it might be something you want to use. And I have some links here for videos on using it after you wait for the commercial. So there's some videos here you can watch and a presentation you can look at. Now, one of the things about FL Digi, it's designed to send Morse code by using tones, and it sends it as through your microphone. I suggest you do not do that. I find that it's not the best sent code. It's also has some problems because if using your radio in single sideband mode so you can send it out through the microphone, you're losing all the features of filtering, CW filtering, and other features of your radio. So I really suggest you don't do it in that mode, that you only operate FL Digi in the CW mode, and you use these alternative ways of keying the radio, not sending in audio tones of the sound, but instead actually keying the radio, either with this little interface or with the WinKey interface. And this is just the information on how you configure FL Digi to use it this way. Before it used to be very hard. Now they have it very easily to do in the software because a lot of people are doing it that way. Before you had to jump through a bunch of hoops to do it this way, but now it's very easy to do it that way. So if you're planning on using FL Digi to send CW, really consider not sending it through the microphone. Now these are 6 things on making typical CW contacts. What type of things you're going to hear, what type of things you're going to be sending. So it's just a whole beginner's guide to making your first CW contacts. And again, I'll let you go through these links. This is your homework for after tonight. Any questions so far? Okay, well, getting better and building your speed. Once you start learning CW, practicing but on the air is a really good way, but there's also online practice tools that you can run. There's simulators, so you can actually simulate a contest and you can adjust the speed and you can play around with these, and you don't have to worry about making a fool out of yourself on the air. You can just make a fool out of yourself and just with you hearing it. The other way you can do it is practice with a buddy. You could even do this over the phone or over 2 meters. It doesn't have to be on HF. You could send Morse code back and forth with your buddy. There's also software apps that you can study with and learn, as we showed earlier, that can help you practice. These are general guides to CW. These are the ones that I had earlier in the presentation. Just like on any other area of amateur radio, there's clubs for people who like to operate CW. And we already mentioned the CW Ops Club as a great place to learn, but then there's also the North American CW Club, QRP Club, which is actually the gentleman that started this was from the Butler area, Butler, Pennsylvania area, and it's a free club that you can join, and they have a nice newsletter that comes out. And then FIST is another group, and SKCC is a straight key century club. Now, for something for kids in your life, this is the little diagram, and here's the instructions for building what I call the clothespin key. And basically for under $2, and the biggest cost in the whole thing is the battery, you can put together a Morse code key using a clothespin, some thumbtacks, a computer buzzer, and a 9-volt battery. And it's just something that's fun for kids, and all the instructions are here. This is a good project if you want to go out and do some work with kids, or if your club would like to do something. If you were doing field day in person, this would be a great project to have at your field day site for kids to do. Might not happen this year, but you can save that idea for later. These are some other presentations, as I said earlier. This is the field day presentation that you might want to go through. It has a lot of ideas on doing field day in social distancing, a lot of things that you might do if your club's not going to do field day as a group this year, especially. This is my contact information. And let's go ahead and have questions. You can either raise your hand and I'll acknowledge you, or you can just speak up. We don't have a huge group, so it should be no problem. And I'm going to go ahead, before we take questions, I'm going to stop the recording.